Mr. Beasley. Hi. We can see your screen clearly. Just to advise you that the party logo would need to be removed.
Sorry.
Checking for sound. Tanya, 1, 2, 3.
Hear you clearly, Mr. Manu.
Thank you.
Hi, Tanya. Ms. Lyons, can you hear me?
Good morning, House Chairperson. Yes, I can hear
Okay.
you and I can see you
Yeah.
clearly.
Okay, no, I was testing if I'm audible.
No, you are. You are
Okay.
definitely.
All right, perfect.
All right. Thanks.
Advocate Lyons, Steve Swarcher, can you hear me?
Perfectly clearly, Mr. Swart.
Yes,
Thank you so
Honorable
much.
Swart, we can hear you.
Thank you, House Chair. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Mm.
Recording in progress. Recording stopped. Recording in progress.
Good morning, honorable members. I welcome all members who have logged in to the virtual mini plenary session. There will now be an opportunity for a silent prayer or meditation. Thank you, honorable members. Honorable members, before we proceed, I would like to remind you that the virtual mini-plenary is deemed to be in the precinct of Parliament and constitute a meeting of the National Assembly for debating purposes only. In addition to the rules of virtual sittings, the rules of the National Assembly, including the rules of debate, apply. Members enjoy the same powers and privileges that apply in a sitting of the National Assembly. Members should equally note that anything said in the virtual platform is deemed to have been said to the House and may be ruled upon. All members who have logged in shall be considered to be present and are requested to mute their microphones and only unmute when recognized to speak. This is because the mics are very sensitive and will pick up noise which might disturb the attention of other members. When recognized to speak, please unmute your microphone and where connectivity permits, connect your video. Members may make use of the icons on the bar at the bottom of their screens, which has an option that allows a member to put up his or her hand to raise points of orders. The Secretariat will assist in alerting the chairperson to members requesting to speak. When using the virtual platform, members are urged to refrain or desist from unnecessary points of orders or interjections. Lastly, honorable members, I wish to remind you that we are meeting in a mini plenary session and therefore any decisions will be taken in a full plenary session of the Assembly. Honorable members, the first item on the order paper is a subject for discussion in the name of Honorable M J Burke on the urgent need to reform South Africa's public procurement laws to tackle poverty, unemployment, and economic exclusion. Before I recognize Honorable Burke, I see the hand of Honorable Mani.
Morning, Chair. No, just checking if we're allowed to have coffee, Chair.
Honorable Mani, please. You can have coffee. You are at your home, it's fine. As long as we don't see your coffee. I will now recognize Honorable M J Burke.
Madam Chair, the ANC economy, the better life for all, looks something like this. If you study really hard, if your parents and grandparents sacrifice everything for a future that apartheid denied them, if you somehow manage to navigate a shattered NSFAS and become an engineer or an accountant, then one day you'll be able to stand at a traffic light in your graduation robes, grasping a cardboard box, displaying your CV on that box. As the ANC economy crawls forward after being shot in one foot by corruption and in the other by bad policy, we're finding that it doesn't matter how much you and your family sacrifices. It doesn't matter how many more B's are added to BEE. You will be denied economic opportunity. In this country, you need to know the right comrades, or you need to be born with a billionaire's surname. This is what looting has brought us. This is what BEE has brought us. We need to look no further than news reports to see that the two are in the same WhatsApp group. BEE has nothing to do with black economic empowerment. It has everything to do with elite empowerment. Now, Madam Chair, I want to be clear on this. The DA is not blind to what economic inequality looks like. Those discriminated against for hundreds of years still experience higher unemployment. Our legacy needs to be acknowledged and faced head-on. The ANC and the DA agree on the problem, but we offer very different solutions and very different public procurement laws. So you might say that the diagnosis is the same, but the cure varies wildly. The ANC wants to sell you top-down equity, where a small percentage of people get rich from tenders and eventually some of the cognac escapes from the clinking glasses and trickles down. We've been trying this for 30 years now. What exactly has trickled down besides blood and bullets? There's this argument that the black middle class exists thanks to BEE. Madam Chair, this argument is deeply insulting. It suggests that after apartheid was ended, when all of us could finally take part as equals in the economy, it wasn't because of the vast talent and immeasurable hard work that people were lifted into the middle class. No, apparently it was BEE. The middle class exists despite BEE, not because of it. And unlike the ANC, the DA solution is direct. We don't trickle down and then peter out. We surge up. We target poverty. We don't mess around with proxy measures that billionaire tender kings can abuse for yet another supercar. So the DA wants to create a South Africa where if you study hard, if you sacrifice for your children, then our public procurement laws mean that there's a ladder waiting for you that you can climb up, not a door where you need to know the comrade's banking details to be able to enter. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Member. And I will now recognize Honorable Sikwati. Honorable S. Sikwati.
Chair,
Is
can you
Honorable
hear me?
Sikwati online?
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. I've been calling out your name.
Okay, but
Can you
I
proceed?
thought you were, okay, thank you. I was saying that thank you for having invited us to this plenary debate. Chair, over the past 31 years, the democratic government has developed a transformative policies and legislations which advance the spirit and intention of the Constitution when it committed in its preamble to recognize the injustices of the past. And when I'm saying the past, I'm talking about hundreds of years. In the Bill of Rights, focusing on equality, the Constitution clearly gives expression to the preamble when it states that, I quote, equality includes the full and equal enjoyment of all rights and freedoms. To promote the achievement of equality, legislative and other measures designed to protect and advance persons or categories of persons disadvantaged by unfair discrimination may be taken, close quote. On procurement, the South African Constitution and an ambiguous in section 217 subsection 1, when an organ of state in the national, provincial, or local sphere of government or any other institution identified in national legislation contracts of goods or services, it must do so in accordance with of contracts and in accordance with the Constitution. This is a constitutional obligation, and the motion of the Democratic Alliance, which seems to advance preferential procurement, but we know that it does not do so because it still wants to make sure that those that were previously disadvantaged continue to be disadvantaged. So it says that when the DA suggests that if you take a deep look to their proposed public procurement amendment bill, it tells you that the South Africans who were previously disadvantaged will remain the same and will continue to be unfairly discriminated. Public expenditure is a significant contributor to the economy as the single highest consumer of goods and services. And in South Africa, the government is spending almost 1 trillion on procurement annually. accounting for 12% of the GDP. This 1 trillion does not benefit a few, as the DA would suggest, and would want South Africans to believe that it's meant for the few. Firstly, the Preferential Procurement Policy Framework Act of 2000 gave an expression to the objective of the Constitution by recognizing that white males in the country have been the beneficiaries of state procurement and participating in the economy, wherein the state plays a key catalyst role. And for this reason that the Constitution was drafted in the manner that it is, and therefore the DA does not really, is not honest when it says that it stands for a better and unfair discrimination for those that are previously disadvantaged. Broad-based Black Economic Empowerment Act number 53 of 2003 has served as a tool to transform the economy. The Preferential Procurement Framework ensures that in allocating the scores for the broad evaluation, the broad-based Black Economic Empowerment level should be evaluated with a 10% or 20% threshold allocated based on the triple BEE compliance, including a decision to allocate a particular preference points to the youth, women, and persons with disabilities. This has ensured that public procurement does not only disproportionately benefit white males in particular, who owns and control the majority of the South African economy. Today, we have many young Black women who own and manage small and medium enterprises that provide services to the government. Women are owning successful construction companies and are almost, and others manufacturing goods which the government procures. Persons with disabilities are also prioritized in the government procurement framework, ensuring that government empowers those that are marginalized. Through the preferential procurement, municipalities have also been able to prioritize the local residents for various economic opportunities, advancing the localization of beneficiaries of state procurement. Madam Chair, as a matter of fact, the progressive legislation of preferential procurement, like the Employment Equity Act, has also benefited white women who were also marginalized by white males. Without the democratic breakthrough, the social position of white women would not be what it is today. And therefore, this policy does not only prefer to benefit Black people, but also white women, because they were previously disadvantaged. They are actually beneficiaries. And it does not necessarily mean that those that are benefiting are politically connected. The DA's Public Procurement Amendment Bill is part of a range of whole legislative proposal of the DA to reverse the gains of the democratic government and the progressive agenda by reversing all policies which focus on the empowerment of Blacks and Africans in particular. The DA challenges the Expropriation Act, which seeks to empower the state to expropriate property in certain circumstances without compensation where it is necessary. They are challenging the legal sector code for the transformation and the restructuring of the legal profession, broadening access to justice by creating equal opportunities for all South Africans. As I quote, in close quote, quote, South Africa's corporate law firms are still dominated by white men, especially in the upper echelons, and 80% of the chief executives of the firms, 12 firms canvassed in the survey were white men, as were 72% of all the managing partners. The Democratic Alliance seeks to restore the status quo to the South African society. Specifically in the Public Procurement Amendment Bill, they seek to direct the procurement away from race-based classifications such as those that replace the BBBEE assessment with an assessment of sustainable development goals. In their critique of the current framework, they falsify claims that a focus on assessing contributions to poverty alleviation, job creation, education, health, and environmental sustainability without racial consideration will lead to the reduction of inequality in South Africa, which will never happen. There's a blunted misrepresentation of the reality of the country, as inequality in South Africa has a specific context of land dispossession, which is an asset and colonial and apartheid state that was designed on the back of injustice and inequality to benefit the white minority. Without tackling the asset inequality in South Africa, we will continue to produce poverty and unemployment. The current owners of means of production in South Africa have resisted all attempts to share the wealth of this country and reassert their control on the economy through financialization and developing complex ownership structures which do not tilt their ownership patterns of the economy and therefore continue to maintain the status quo. The DA further conflate preferential procurement to be against value for money, which is a distortion, Chair. Yes, we must deal with the corrupt practices which exploit the tendering system, but that does not negate the necessity of the state to use procurement as a transformative instrument in the hands of government, as enshrined in the Constitution. And as a matter of fact, the DA proposal actually lowers the standard for value of money by proposing a 30% share of weight to be to the price, while the current system has a higher standard of 80% and 90% for the price. South Africa is not only a country with a race-based preferential procurement share. Australia, Canada, Colombia, New Zealand, Malaysia, Indonesia, and Brazil have also indigenous or targeted procurement policies, and hence their economies are thriving today. The DA wants the white minority to continue to dominate the over 1 trillion expenditure on public procurement. And therefore, the ANC will not support the public procurement amendment bill, as it's an antithesis of dealing with the race and gender contradictions impacting on the South African society. Thank you, Chair.
Honorable Sikwati.
Madam Chair.
Yes, I've been calling out your name to alert you that your time is expired, but you kept on going on and continuing.
I did not hear. I'm sorry, Chair. I apologize.
No, you can't say you did not hear, but you can hear me now when I call you.
I apologize.
Members, let's not do that.
Thank you.
Let me now recognize Honorable S.G. Mwali.
Thank you so much, Chairperson.
Continue.
Members and to the people of this country, we cannot downplay the importance of reforming South Africa's public procurement laws in order to break the ongoing cycle of poverty and unemployment, economic exclusion that blights the lives of millions of citizens. As prescribed and articulated in Section 217 of the Constitution, procurement must be fair, equitable, transparent, and competitive, and cost-effective. Public procurement is not just an administrative function, but it is rather a constitutional imperative and a tool for transformation. As such, the failure to implement and audit these principles allowed corruption to thrive and undermine the very goal of economic inclusion and redress. Parliament must reframe procurement beyond being a process of acquiring goods and services. It is a strategic lever for economic restructuring and empowerment. With an understanding of how apartheid excluded the majority of our people from being part of the mainstream economy, proper procurement, when harnessed to support historically disadvantaged individuals, groups, generates genuine opportunities for Black-owned businesses and SMEs. It is also emerging economy. It's also for emerging economies to be part of the national agenda. As such, serve as a vehicle for inclusive growth. The true crisis in this public procurement system does not stem from the transformative intent of policies such as BEE, but from the chronic shortcomings in control and in audit procedures and oversight. Weaknesses in implementation of such as inadequate annual procurement plans, lack of monitoring, and irregular deviations from competitive processes not only open a door for corruption practices, but ultimately deprive communities from vital development and services. Effective oversight structures must demand regular, transparent reporting on procurement plans and deviations, and must ensure that every tender and contract is subject to scrutiny and proper risk mitigation. Madam Chair, the argument that blames BEE policies on procurement failures are fundamental attempts to preserve a status quo, continued state procurement from established, often white firms at an expense of economic transformation and social justice. The evidence is clear. Where controls and vigilance are lacking, corruption and abuse flourish regardless whether beneficiaries are new or old suppliers. The persistent association of BEE with procurement failures not only marginalize transformation processes, but divert the attention from real failures in the state auditing and compliance. As Umkhonto weSizwe Party, we understand that those who use criticism of BEE are not doing so genuinely, but out of masking and defending their privileged interest. It is not a genuine concern on reform debate, but to fix what can be fixed, rather on abandoning the transformation and ensuring that apartheid beneficiaries continue to dominate the economy based on exclusion of the masses. Madam Chairperson, the pressing issue facing procurement is not the existence of preferential policies, but the lack of capacity, professional training, and effective implementation of controls in government by those who are charged with governance. Many supply chain units operate with high vacancy rates, skills gap, leaving officials ill-equipped to execute procurement procedures and to identify irregularities. As such, Parliament must demand procurement planning, ongoing professional training, and the establishment of automated processes and standardized checklists that enables monitoring. The key reforms, Chairperson, will be to mandate minimum local content requirements in public tenders and thereby stimulating domestic industry and employment. Provide targeted support, which includes mentorship and preferential treatment to Black-owned businesses and SMEs, ensuring genuine opportunities for economic participation. Established an open and transparent tender process that require regular and independent audits as non-negotiable standards across government. Institutes a comprehensive whistleblower protection and robust anti-corruption mechanism, holding officials and suppliers to account for breaches. To ensure skills building and training programs for all officials involved in procurement, and closing gaps that permit weak oversight and manipulation processes. Chair, these reforms will culminate a procurement system that gives effect to constitutional values and redress, and the inherited injustices of apartheid. Millions of South Africans will benefit from this increased economic participation, and it will reduce unemployment and local business development and targeted poverty targeted poverty alleviation. Importantly, Chair, a fair and vigilant procurement system will restore public trust in government and and is a transformative promise to the state's intervention. As I close, Chair, for all lawmakers and parties, we must unite behind the urgent need for reform of public procurement laws. Parliament cannot allow divisive rhetorics and vested interest to derail processes critical to South Africa's prosperity, freedom, and dignity. The time for reform is now, and only through transparent, rigorous audits and renewed focus on transformation will this nation achieve its inclusive growth and long-term stability. It is the duty of this House to end the inter-alia and the confusion surrounding the procurement policies and deliver reforms that serve South Africa's best interest with integrity. And Chair, we know that those who are against this transformative agenda are serving their masters, and there are people who are managing this process outside of this House. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Member. Before I continue recognizing the next speaker, my apologies, Honorable Members. I'm using a different laptop, so I don't have the Parliament photos here, but I'm trying to load them so that I have the Parliament background on. I'm fortunate, maybe in the next 10 minutes, I would have that background. And let me now recognize Honorable LMPT.
Thank you very much, House Chairperson. We all know the story far too well. The language may be different, but the point is always the same. You have to know someone inside in order to benefit. Whilst millions of people are left out from benefiting from government contracts over the years, there's been a small group that has been able to siphon funds from the state using a policy that has left a majority of South African citizens in the clutches of poverty. A life of Maseratis, Porsches, and Lamborghinis is what we have been accustomed to, whilst the majority watch on the side of the streets on their way to work, struggling, trying, and doing all they can to make it, and still falling short. Members debating in this debate need to be honest and transparent about the state of our economy and its effect on South Africans. 31 years into democracy, the living conditions and prospects of the majority of South Africans has not significantly changed. The gap between the richest and the poorest is still far too wide. It should not be a crime to recognize that there are policies that have only benefited a few politically connected individuals at the expense of poor South Africans, whilst also acknowledging that the majority of Black South Africans in this country remain in poverty despite policies like BEE. We cannot pretend that this is a normal policy or maintain a policy that is clearly not working for the majority. We simply cannot, honorable members, continue a debate where we refuse to see the truth for what it is. Professor William Gumede has estimated that 1 trillion has been moved between 100 people since 1994. In addition, because of the importance of political connections to accessing BEE contracts, much of the spending meant for the poor South Africans has ended up in the pockets of officials and entrepreneurs. We already are prepared for arguments that will be made in this debate, arguments to continue to deceive South Africans. So I want to take this opportunity to set the record straight. The DA is committed to transformation of our society by ending and fighting inequality of opportunity and improving the socio-economic conditions of South Africans most vulnerable. We are committed to redressing the injustices of the past, but we do not believe that this policy is key in helping us fight the gaps between the poor and the rich. What is significant about the DA's position is that we can no longer stand by and watch entrepreneurs benefit from state procurement, and people who are supposedly supposed to benefit from these policies are actually excluded. Millions of South Africans desperately need inclusion in this economy. They are poor and they need us to act. Therefore, policies that seek to redress the injustices of the past must focus on unlocking opportunity, fostering inclusion, and delivering social impact in affected communities. In order to do this, we need a genuine empowerment that addresses inequality of opportunity, unemployment, and poverty. The existing preferential procurement system is targeted at people who are already business owners. Therefore, disadvantaged South Africans are not in a position to bid for public tenders, so they cannot benefit from BEE in public procurement. Instead, we propose changing our public procurement framework to align with internationally recognized United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, such as no poverty, decent work and economic growth, and zero hunger. This will ensure that preference is given to bids that will actually improve the lives of the poor and vulnerable South Africans and not politically connected bidders. This is why the DA is introducing the Public Procurement Amendment Bill, along with newly developed public procurement scorecard to implement this change. The scorecard seeks to direct public procurement away from race-based classifications towards a more inclusive evaluation system, directly addressing the root cause of inequality of opportunity. When bidding for a contract, businesses will be assessed by their contributions towards SDG goals that best reflect their business model, social investment focus, or local community engagement. For instance, under the SDG grouping of human development, two SDGs relate to ending poverty and hunger. Therefore, if a business funds a community feeding scheme or supports job placements in low-income communities, it will receive a higher score for its contribution than it would if it did not. This will ensure that benefits go directly to communities that need the assistance and not politically connected individuals. In addition, our scorecard places a high value on cost effectiveness, technical skills behind the bid. This will enable government to prioritize cost effectiveness and quality rather than overpaying for substandard services. The design of the system will redirect millions of wasteful BEE spending from small connected few and towards the poor and most vulnerable communities across South Africa, which are largely Black South Africans already. We cannot keep doing the same things and hoping for different results. We have an opportunity now to fight for South Africans. I thank you very much, Chairperson.
Honorable Chair, am I the only one muted?
Yeah, I also thought it's me.
Chair, where are you?
Honorable members,
Members, my apologies. I don't know what happened, but yeah, I just got cut off. But I'm back now. Is everyone, am I audible?
Yes.
Yes,
Okay.
Chair, you are
Thank you very
audible.
much. Thank you very much. Can I now recognize a speaker from the EFF? There's no name that is written here.
Bonga Slalo, I'll be doing the debate for EFF.
Thank you very much. Continue, Honorable Member.
Thank you, House Chairperson. There will always be those who seek to exploit the tragic killing of Babita Deokaran, a courageous public servant murdered by drug and tender cartels who looted funds meant for patients at Tembisa Hospital. They will exploit our emotions, our frustration and anger to push for reforms that, beneath the surface, are driven not by justice or transformation, but by the desire to protect the current economic order, to protect the white capitalist establishment, and to block any effort to transfer wealth to the Black majority. Let us be clear about what we are dealing with, what exactly is happening with public procurement. At all levels of government, the South African state depends almost entirely on third parties, consultants, contractors, and so-called service providers to deliver even the most basic of services. The state has become hollowed out. It cannot build a road, it cannot fix a leaking water pipe, or even purchase school stationery without a tender. We have become what is known as a contract state, a government that exists through contracts rather than through its own capacity. Now, having tenders or contractors is not in itself a problem. The problem lies in how these tenders are conceived, managed, and abused. Those who should be drafting specifications, developing sound contracts, setting clear evaluation criteria, and ensuring quality assurance often lack the skills, the discipline, or the integrity to do so. The result is predictable. Government pays for services never delivered or for poor quality work that fails within months. Corruption and rent seeking deepen the rot, draining billions from the fiscus every year. House Chairperson, there is no reform of the current procurement framework that will fix this crisis. Amending the preferential procurement regulations or adopting another so-called public procurement bill will not solve a fundamentally broken system. What we need is state capacity, internal, permanent, professional state capacity. We must rebuild the state to do things for itself. We must employ engineers, artisans, town planners, quantity surveyors, water scientists, and other professionals directly into government on a full-time basis. Only then can we gradually abolish tenders for services the state can perform internally. If we need stationery, we should buy it directly from the manufacturer, not through parasitic middlemen who add no value but inflate prices. The obsession with outsourcing has created a culture of dependency and exploitation that benefits a few while condemning millions to unemployment and poverty. This is not an abstract debate for us in the EFF. Whether the EFF governs or shares power, we do not theorize, we insource. We begin with the insourcing of security guards and cleaners in the city of Johannesburg, a victory that restored dignity, stable income, and benefits to thousands of workers who had been exploited under labor broker contracts. That is what practical transformation looks like. That is what economic inclusion means. House Chairperson, the only meaningful procurement reform is one that builds the productive capacity of the state. Let municipalities hire their own engineers instead of hiring consultants at 10 times the cost. Let hospitals employ their own maintenance staff instead of outsourcing cleaning and repairs. Let provinces and national departments rebuild workshops, training centers, and technical teams that can plan, build, and maintain public infrastructure themselves. When the state works through its own hands, it will save billions, deliver quality, and create employment for our people, not for middlemen. It will reduce the corruption that thrives in the tender system. Most importantly, it will strike at the root of inequality, poverty, and exclusion that continue to define the lives of Black South Africans. The EFF stands firm. The future of this country will not be built by tenderpreneurs, but by a capable, socialist, developmental state that works for its people. I thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you very much, Honorable Member. I will now recognize Honorable Hatebe.
Thank you, Honorable Chairperson. The IFP welcomes this debate at a crucial moment for South Africa's economic recovery and governance re-establishment. When the President of the Republic signed the Public Procurement Act into law in July 2024, South Africa took a significant step toward establishing a unified system for government expenditure. However, passing a new law alone will not fix the deep problems that continue to damage public trust and limit fair economic opportunities. Public procurement is the livelihood of our developmental state. According to the National Treasury, it accounts for around 15% of our GDP and involves over 70,000 suppliers, the vast majority of whom are small, micro, and medium enterprises. When managed effectively, this system can stimulate local industry, support township economies, and open real opportunities for women and youth. When mismanaged, it breeds corruption, waste, and exclusion, deepening the very poverty it should help to eradicate. The IFP notes that while the new Act aligns with Section 217 of our Constitution, implementation will determine its success. Procurement laws must go beyond compliance and become catalysts for transformation, transparency, and accountability. Confusion, Too much discretion and inconsistent use of rules have made government procurement unfair and unclear. We cannot have a system where each department has different rules and where loopholes allow people to take advantage. The recent methodology for assessing procurement systems, assessing and Treasury's consolidated recommendations highlight several critical areas for reform that the IFP supports. First, the legal framework must be clarified. Procurement methods and bid timeframes need to be standardized to eliminate uncertainty and bias. Second, transparency must become non-negotiable. Only 12% of organs of state uploaded procurement plans in 2023-2024, and just 3% published contract notices. A shocking failure of accountability. Full publication record keeping and digitization through an end-to-end e-procurement platforms are essential. Third, governance capacity must be strengthened. The Office of the Procurement of the Chief Procurement Officer currently faces an approximate 43% vacancy rate. Without skilled professionals and consequence management, even the best frameworks will falter. Fourth, digitization and professionalization must be prioritized. Integrated systems that detect corruption risks and promote data analysts are vital to prevent irregular expenditure. Supply chain officers must receive accredited training and operate under a renewed culture of ethical stewardship. Finally, we must institutionalize sustainability and inclusivity. Procurement should favor locally produced goods, green technologies, and enterprises owned by historically disadvantaged South Africans. Reforming procurement is not a bureaucratic exercise. It is an economic imperative. A transparent and professional procurement system can redirect billions toward schools, hospitals, and infrastructure. It can create jobs, empower SMMEs, and restore faith in public institutions. In this spirit, the IFP urges swift and coordinated implementation of the Public Procurement Act, guided by National Treasury's recommendations and grounded in ethical governance. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Member. We will now move on to Honorable Passon. Honorable Passon.
Thank you, Chairperson. I'm requesting to please mute my video as my signal is not well.
It's okay, Honorable Member. Please continue.
Thank you, ma'am. Honorable Speaker, honorable members, and the most important of all, my fellow South Africans. South Africa is a nation rich in resources, but poor in opportunity. Every year, the state controls nearly 1 trillion through public procurement, yet millions of our South Africans remain unemployed, in poverty, and excluded from economic participation. How can this be? My fellow South Africans, because our procurement laws, as they stand, favor the powerful, enrich inequality, and reward connections over competence. Honourable members, this is not a minor insufficiency. This is a moral crisis. Our small businesses, particularly those owned by women, youth, and historically disadvantaged communities, are systematically locked out. Meanwhile, politically connected firms monopolize contracts, perpetuating cycles of poverty. Reform is not optional. It is urgent, it is necessary, and it is overdue. We must rewrite procurement laws to embed social and economic value in every contract. Each rand spent by the state must create jobs, develop skills, and strengthen local economies. This is not mere policy. It is justice in action. It is fulfillment of our Constitution, Mandate to create a more equal society. Delay is complacency. To fail to reform is to fail the millions who are hungry for opportunity in our country. The time is now, and as a Patriotic Alliance, we will never stop fighting to create jobs and to ensure equal opportunity for all the people of South Africa. Ons Baizani, I thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Member. I will now recognize Dr. Poshoff.
Honorable House Chair, I take a different angle on the question of public procurement, that of the scientific councils in South Africa, which have a mandate to create opportunities and solutions through the use of science, technology, and innovation. With the recent G20 Science, Technology, and Innovation Conference in Pretoria, it was enlightening to see the impact of the CSIR, and if necessary to mention the number of Black and female achievers. Yet South Africa spent expenditure of 0.7% of national expenditure on this area compared to a target of 1.5% is another story. Every cent needs to be spent as efficiently as possible. Science councils are mainly funded by parliamentary grants, yet public procurement rules prohibit other state organs to use their services without a prior competitive process. It is true, the Constitution does require competitive open bidding as a default in public procurement to prevent sweetheart deals. In that regard, it's not always that successful, but it does impede these councils' ability to fulfill their mandates. National Treasury does indeed allow deviations, but state institutions rather don't apply for fear of adverse audit findings. The process is widely perceived as difficult to manage. The CSIR has repeatedly applied to be formally designated as a preferred service provider for certain core services and capabilities. Following the principle of competitiveness, however, National Treasury had turned these down. There is an urgent need for change. The CSIR can be revised, or a Treasury practice note can enable the CSIR to deliver more effectively on its mandate. These councils, CSIR, HSRC, can also become dedicated line items for relevant departments. State expenditure should promote investment in local development and procurement, especially considering the significant knowledge base available. Reduce reliance on imported solutions, the financial sustainability of these institutions, localization of manufacturing, and job creation are some foreseeable advantages. For example, the CSIR, with a large network of partners, developed and manufactured 18,000 ventilators, which played a significant role during the COVID-19 pandemic. The state can and should become a smart user and buyer of technology. No company employs someone with a scarce skill just to let someone else do the job. The state should not do that to its own councils. A tweak in public procurement can achieve this. I thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Member. We will now move to recognizing Honorable Beasley.
Thank you, Chair. The question before us is not whether South Africa's public procurement laws need reform. They clearly do. The question is whether we'll use this opportunity to deliver real inclusion or repeat the mistakes of both the ANC and the DA. More than 2 decades after broad-based Black economic empowerment was introduced, expanded unemployment stands at 43%. Inequality remains amongst the worst in the world, and unemployment amongst Black South Africans has increased from 28% in 2015 to 37% in 2025. What was meant to be broad-based empowerment has become ANC economic empowerment, a conveyor belt of tenders for the politically connected, paid for by the poor. BBBE has failed not because transformation is unnecessary, but because it has been captured by a governing elite who confuse enrichment with empowerment. Yet, the DA's so-called economic inclusion bill swings to the opposite extreme. According to the notice tabled by the Parliament, the bill would repeal the BBBE Act and replace race-based preferences with a procurement model built on the Sustainable Development Goals. Chairperson, South Africa's inequality is not race neutral. It is color-coded poverty, the direct inheritance of apartheid's design. To pretend otherwise is to deny history and to deny millions still trapped by it. We cannot correct injustices by ignoring it. The problem in our procurement system is not that the state does business with Black-owned firms. It is that corruption has hollowed out the system meant to empower ordinary South Africans. The SIU has recommended 467 individuals and companies for blacklisting, yet only one appears on the National Treasury's Restricted Suppliers Register. The other 466 remain eligible to win government contracts. Two uncomfortable truths explain this. First, the hawks who investigate on behalf of the NPA are underfunded and understaffed. Their budget is smaller than that of the VIP protection for ministers and deputies, and almost half their posts are vacant. Second, many accounting officers and departments and SOEs have skeletons in their own closets, and acting against others risk exposing themselves. That is why Action SA has lodged a complaint with the Public Protector, urging her to ensure that the SIU recommendations are implemented without delay. The Public Protector has confirmed that this investigation is underway. Action SA will go further. We will introduce legislation to empower National Treasury to act when municipal managers, DGs, and the accounting authorities of SOEs fail to enforce blacklisting recommendations. Because when the system refuses to police itself, Parliament must. Beyond cleaning up corruption, true empowerment must create opportunity. Action SA's proposed opportunity will replace expensive BBBE compliance with a 3% profit contribution from large firms, channeled into education and entrepreneurship, infrastructure, and sustainability. It will dissolve redundant agencies and redirect these resources into building skills, clinics, and small businesses. Chairperson, this debate is not about contracts, it's about justice. The ANC has failed transformation through corruption. The DA would fail it again through denial. Action SA chooses a third path, a procurement system that restores integrity, builds opportunity, and delivers for the many, not the few. Let us build a future that truly works for everyone. I thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Member. I will now recognize Honorable Swart.
Thank you, House Chair. House Chair, the ACDP wishes to thank Dr. Burke for raising this important issue. We agree that there is an urgent need to reform the country's public procurement laws to tackle poverty, unemployment, and economic exclusion. Public procurement accounts for a significant portion of government expenditure, as indicated by previous speakers, nearly R1 trillion annually, which is approximately 22% of South Africa's GDP. The ACDP does not support preferential procurement provisions, which have contributed to state capture and corruption, have grossly inflated government contracts, and benefited only a small group of politically connected individuals. The Public Procurement Act was supposed to be a comprehensive response to the Zondo Commission's damning findings on preferential procurement that contributed to state capture and corruption. The Act is, we believe, largely a missed opportunity to fundamentally address the many deficiencies in public procurement. Judge Zondo himself has expressed doubts as to whether this Act will stop corruption in the public sector. The sharpest legal brains in South Africa came together to form the Joint Strategic Resources to comment on the bill and suggest amendments. Scant regard was, however, given to these inputs, and this is sad to see this valuable resource largely overlooked. The drafting and finalization of complex regulations is still outstanding and is crucial to provide more specific operational details, such as permissible procurement methods and thresholds. Professor Giacchino of the African Procurement Law Unit states that those are important practical aspects that he hopes or will get some sight of very soon. Because for many procuring institutions, the changes that those detailed operational rules will bring about are going to be very important in terms of their own planning, operational systems, and standard operational proceedings. The ACDP trusts that these legal experts will be consulted when the regulations are being considered. The Act is still subject to litigation regarding its constitutionality. This we hope will be finalized soon in order to avoid wasting a lot of time drafting regulations, only to find that parts of the Act are found to be unconstitutional. Lastly, the ACDP is also concerned that certain provisions in the Act will embolden extortion syndicates who, under the guise of business forums, show up armed at construction sites, demanding that 30% of the projects be subcontracted to their companies. These groups don't hesitate to disrupt construction projects and must be faced with the full force of the law. I thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Member. If there's anyone from the UDM, okay, we move. Anyone from RISE? RISE? Okay, let's move. BOSA? BOSA? ATM? ATM? I will now recognize Honorable Siate from the ANC. Honorable Siate?
Yes, Speaker, am I audible?
Yes, you are now.
Okay, thank you very much, Speaker. Greetings to the House Chair, members, and South Africa. So the African National Congress wants to catalyze productive capabilities of local economies through local content and localization. Now, public procurement is a critical instrument to develop the productive capacity of our economy. Public procurement should be leveraged to catalyze our industries as the goods and services that the government spend on can be produced locally by small, medium-sized industries. The real benefits of public spendings are not the appointed contractors by the government, but the workers who are involved in the value chain of the production of goods and services. Major industries in South Africa are also the biggest beneficiaries of public procurement, as various appointed suppliers buy goods from them. Therefore, an argument which seeks to reduce the impact of public procurement to only be at a supply level is a lazy argument from the Democratic Alliance. If we look at the details of the impact of public spending, the intended beneficiaries might not be accruing a significant value in the process, as the producers of goods are mainly white men. The ANC, however, in its manifesto has committed to advancing the development of industries as a key area of job creation. Now, the Public Procurement Act regulations, which are yet to be published, should enable the enhanced approach to enable public procurement to have targeted support to emerging Black industrialists and industries which are owned by women, youth, and persons with disabilities. The ANC Youth League, however, has also been calling for the industrialization of the economy to ensure there is a value addition domestically to create jobs, to ensure industries are developed across the country, to ensure jobs are created in all provinces. Honorable members, let us take the National School Nutrition Program as an example. The food inputs consumed in the schools should be linked with community and household agricultural farmers within the locations. And the Department of Land Redistribution and the Agricultural Department should have a focused strategy to support food producers. The same model can be applied to other goods. This will practically give meaning to using public procurement to transform the racially dominance in our economy. The DA in the Western Cape, however, have also contributed to weakening the implementation of the preferential procurement framework. Now, the Western Cape government spent 19.73 billion on procurement during the 2024 and 25 financial year. Only 57% is spent on Black-owned companies and a small 6% for youth-owned companies, and only 34% for women-owned enterprises, and only 1% for persons with disabilities. The DA calls for the removal of race-based public procurement. They, in a sense, want 57% for Black-owned companies to decline to be significantly low level, so that the significant majority of suppliers are white. The ANC has ensured the public procurement to ensure it has set asides for different categories to prevent the Democratic Alliance governed institute to not reduce spending on Black-owned companies, youth-owned, women-owned, and persons with disabilities. Under the Public Procurement Act regulations, the set-aside will ensure the 6% spent on the youth in the Western Cape is significantly increased. The 1% for the persons with disabilities will have an increase, and the spending on women-owned enterprises should be above 40%. The DA bill seeks to reverse these developments to create an equitable society. The Western Cape procurement data also reflects the concentration of the appointment of requests for quotations to fewer companies. Now, with 21,404 awards, finalized, that benefited only 1,668 suppliers. Under their proposed bill, the number, though not equitable, will further decline, benefiting only a few companies with concentrated capabilities. The African National Congress has observed the persistent campaign for the DA to advance the interest of the minority at the expense of the Black majority. The refusal of the DA to join efforts to advance the redistribution of wealth in the country is evident that the party continues to protect the gains of apartheid and intends to reverse the gains of the democratic dispensation. In relation to major BBEE transaction, we can confidently report that Black-owned ownership has significantly increased from 20% to 37%, showing progress in gender inclusivity as reported in 2023 and 24 financial year. What is concerning is that Black-owned has decreased to 57%, down from 59% in the previous year. We must also state that the DA cannot even project how their policy proposal can lead to tackling asset and income equality in South Africa. They merely seek to demoralize BBEE while they want it removed for them to be taking advantage of the public expenditure without transforming their own firms. For the ANC, the proposal of the DA and its call is the highest level of betrayal of the constitutional promise. Also, the constitutional obligation to redress and transform all institutes and all systems that seeks to perpetuate systems that are continuously disadvantaged, the previously disadvantaged groupings. They do not want quotas through employment equity, yet they argue to advance the interest of all South Africans. South Africa should be vigilant and further interrogate the motives of the Democratic Alliance. We don't support their campaign, and we propose this bill to be rejected by Parliament. We therefore reject their proposal, and with that said, Speaker, I would like to thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you, Honorable Member. And we will now move to Al-Jama. Al-Jama. NCC. NCC. PAC. PAC. UAT. U80. Good. Good. I will now recognize Honorable Mdluli from the DA.
Honorable Chairperson, there is no doubt that apartheid is one of the main reasons South Africa continues to be the most unequal country in the world. But 3 decades into democracy, we must acknowledge an uncomfortable truth. The race-based policies of the democratic era have failed to correct this injustice. When the first democratically elected government assumed power in 1994, it promised to address inequality in all spheres of life, not just political, but also social and economic. Policies such as broad-based Black economic empowerment and affirmative action were supposed to do this. But more than 30 years later, the data is damning. The World Bank's 2022 report titled Inequality in Southern Africa found that South Africa is not only the most unequal country in our region, but the most unequal country in the world. It noted that 41% of income inequality is explained by race, while education contributes 30%. The report confirmed that the legacy of apartheid's racial and spatial segregation continues to shape a society today. However, the persistence of inequality is not just a legacy problem, it is a policy problem. According to the IMF, South Africa's Gini coefficient stands at around 0.67, a scale from 0 to 1, where 0 represents perfect equality and 1 is extreme inequality. This places our country among the most unequal societies in the world. And according to Stats SA's quarterly labor force survey, the expanded unemployment rate for Black South Africans stood at 37.1% in Q2 of 2025, higher than any other race groups. These are not just numbers; they reflect millions of lives trapped in poverty. Chairperson, the failure to reduce inequality is not because the government has spent too little, but because it has spent unwisely. According to the National Treasury assessment published last year, public procurement accounts for about 15% of GDP, roughly 931.5 billion in 2021-2022 financial year. Yet, instead of being used as a tool for inclusion and opportunity, the vast spending has captured by elite and used to reward political loyalty rather than competence. Broad-based Black economic empowerment, as it currently stands, has entrenched exclusion instead of alleviating it. It has created a trickle-down redress model that transfers wealth from one elite to another, rather than lifting ordinary South Africans out of poverty. That is why the DA's Public Procurement Amendment Bill, introduced by the Honourable Matt Cuthbert, is a bold and necessary step towards genuine economic inclusion. The bill recognizes that our race-based procurement policies have failed to deliver transformation at scale. It replaces them with an objective, measurable, race-neutral system grounded in the UN's sustainable goals, focusing on poverty reduction, decent work, innovation, and sustainable industrial growth. The bill seeks to align public procurement with the SDGs, ensuring that every tender contributes to inclusive development. Chairperson, what does this mean in practice? It means that the bidders will no longer be evaluated on political proximity or who they are connected to. Instead, procurement decisions will be guided by clear, measurable indicators of how projects will reduce poverty, expand opportunity, and uplift communities. Bidders will be required to demonstrate, for example, how they will support food security, empower small-scale farmers, create sustainable jobs, or build local economic capacity. In this way, government contracts will reward genuine developmental impact rather than a political access. Secondly, the bill seeks to repeal race-based preferences and the BBBE Act that have failed to produce broad-based empowerment. Thirdly, the bill seeks to strengthen the Public Procurement Tribunal to ensure professionalism and accountability. And lastly, it seeks to ensure that procurement policies are transparent, competitive, and fair, as envisaged by Section 217 of the Constitution. Honorable members, this reform will not erase redress. It'll make it real. It'll direct opportunity towards those who truly need it, which are the unemployed youth in Msinga, the small business owner in Ngutu, and the woman-led cooperative in Wamashu. The DA's approach is very clear. Empowerment must be about capability and not connections. It must be about delivery and not dependency. By reforming procurement, we can turn into a powerful engine for growth, support entrepreneurship, and reduce poverty and create jobs across racial and geographic lines. Chairperson, public money must serve the public good, not the politically connected as it stands. The DA's public procurement amendment bill offers a new path from elite enrichment to genuine empowerment, from race-based exclusion to shared opportunity. Let us choose reform. Let us build a South Africa that rewards people's efforts, that fosters a fairness and creates an opportunity for all. I thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Member. I will now recognize Honorable Kaleka Mazibugo.
Honorable Chair, fellow South Africans, the Democratic Alliance arrives here today draped in the blue flag of hypocrisy, peddling what they call a non-racial economic inclusion bill that deletes the word race and hopes that centuries of racial exclusion will politely disappear with it. What a marvel of political engineering. To think that 350 years of dispossession, slavery, suppression, and job reservation can be undone by a legislative delete button. South Africans did not wake up unequal by administrative error. Our inequality was designed brick by colonial and apartheid architects who captured every inch of this economy, from farms to the factories, from the stock exchange to the schooling system, and left Black people chained to the margins. 3.5 centuries of racial plunder cannot be wished away by semantic trickery dressed up as inclusion. The DA's so-called economic inclusion for all bill seeks to repeal race-based preferences in the Public Procurement Act of 2024, pretending that poverty is a colorless inconvenience. Honorable members, poverty in South Africa has a name, a face, and a pigment. It is not colorblind. It is color-coded by history itself. Their bill is not non-racial. It is a racial amnesia in policy form. And then, with the arrogance of privilege, they tell us BBBE failed. Failed whom? The same people who for centuries were denied entry to banks, boards, and business deals. The same people whose parents built the mines, cleaned the offices, and tilled the fields, but were forbidden by law to own the means of production. Let me educate the DA. Ownership and control in BBBE does not come mahala. It is not a handout, not a lottery ticket, not some magical redistribution. People like President Cyril Ramaphosa, Irene Chenley, Eric Mulobi, and countless others raised loans, yes, actually loans, to buy their shares. Some made it. Others failed, as is the nature of business. But they risked, they participated in an economy that once declared them subhuman. To focus only on those who succeeded while ignoring the thousands who struggled is nothing short of emotional blackmail by a political party bankrupt on ideas and addicted to attacking the ANC instead of proposing nation-building policies. Preferential procurement is also about marginalized groups being prioritized and not just measures and acquisitions. Their so-called policy alternative is a draconian fantasy that aims to restore white comfort zones under the banner of reform. They scream about connected elites, yet forget that true elites are those who inherited land, infrastructure, and accumulated wealth through apartheid's legalized theft. They whine about a few black shareholders while ignoring that 60% of corporate South Africa remains white-owned and white-controlled. The real imbalance is not that BEE went too far. It's that it has not yet gone far enough. The DA calls employment equity quotas. I call that progress with a measuring tape. They call set-asides unfair advantage. I call that justice with a budget code. If equality cannot be measured, it cannot be delivered. And honorable members, let us expose another lie. The notion that BEE excludes white people. Across every municipality and public entity, even in manual work, opportunities are open to all races. Pick it up in Johannesburg, for example, had programs open for white refuse collection employees. Not one came forward. They prefer management without sweat, profit without production, ownership without effort. We cannot be emotionally blackmailed into preserving white superiority under the guise of fairness. The DA's obsession with labeling BEE as elitist is the final insult. We, the children of mine dormitories, townships and hostels, are told that empowerment is corruption, while they, the descendants of colonial wealth, pretend their inheritance was merit. If they want to talk about elites, let's talk about the suburbs built with stolen land, the pensions funded by black labor, the infrastructure denied to the majority. So, no, we will not apologize for BEE. We will not dilute employment equity. We will not abandon preferential procurement. Section 9, subsection 2 of our Constitution demands remedial measures for the victims of past discrimination. And Section 217 mandates a procurement framework that advances the previously disadvantaged. That is not racial discrimination. That is justice doing its job. We will operate within the law, yes, but within that law, we will bend the economic architecture towards equity until it reflects the demographics of this country. We are content to operate in the fines of legality, but we will never be confined by the comfort zones of white nostalgia. Honorable Speaker, the DA's colorblind inclusion is nothing more of preserving apartheid's economic DNA in a polite accent. South Africans must see it for what it is, a protection racket for privilege, a defense of Aryan ideal in policy disguise. Our message is simple. BEE is not charity. It is a correction and redress. Employment equity is not bias, it is balance. And the ANC's transformation agenda is not vengeance. It is vindication of centuries of stolen humanity. Let the DA squirm in their blue suits of moral bankruptcy. We will stay in the trenches of transformation with the people, for the people, and in defense of the Constitution that they selectively quote but never truly believe in. Because, honorable members, we are not race obsessed. We are history literate, and history has a long memory. Instead of calling for an end to BEE, this parliament should focus on the abuse of BEE to prevent the transfer of ownership, as many companies have an impressive BEE rating, yet there is low black ownership. We support the call that BEE has become like an exam that is too easy to pass, and companies have found ways to game the system. The empowerment rules need to be rewritten as Duma Qubule correctly argues, we must strengthen the system to realize true transformation and shifts in the ownership of the South African economy. Honorable Chair, this is the same DA against the minimum wage that relies on the lies of Professor Gumede to attack Triple BEE with no evidence. This House must note that Gumede was paid consultant of the Moonshot Pact. Accuser izinto angakwazi ukuziprova. There is no evidence. Sibajongile. We are not going to go back. Transformation is what we are going to do, and forward we go. I thank you, Honorable Speaker.
Thank you, Honorable Member. I will now recognize our last speaker, who is the Honorable Burke.
Thank you, Madam Chair. There's so much that I agree with in Honorable Galeka Mazibuku's speech. I agree that hundreds of years of apartheid and colonialism has left us with deep inequality and poverty. In defense of quotas, she mentions that we must measure what is happening in South Africa in order to correct it. We have measured. We've measured inequality in the last 20 years. We measured unemployment in the last 20 years. And BEE has not corrected this. And that speaks to a broader theme today, Madam Chair. What we're seeing from many parties reminds me of a Japanese soldier, Hiroshi Unada. He was a soldier that refused to admit that his country had lost World War II. And so he hid away in the jungle and kept fighting for another 30 years. Unada is not alone, nor is this kind of fanatic denial limited to warfare. Cult followers and celebrity superfans, for instance, refuse to believe that their hero is no longer with us. For these folks, Elvis didn't die, he moved to eThekwini. In South Africa, developing in our midst, we have our own cult of BEE, and its followers will look straight at the corpse, but deny its death. People who refuse to let go of broken policy because, as we are hearing day after day in commissions and committees, politicians benefit from a broken procurement system. Whereas Unada, the soldier, lived on the edge of starvation, the BEE cult keeps feasting. It's difficult to get rid of BEE if the fat cat Matlala types make sure the tender kickbacks don't stop flowing. But, Chairperson, we are not deterred by this resistance. The status quo simply cannot hold. South Africans who live in poverty cannot stand it anymore. Some of them are starving. And all of us who experience an increasingly unequal country will not sit idly by. I will not sit idly by. They will not, and we will not keep swallowing the BEE lie. So the DA will keep pushing for better procurement policies. We will keep fighting for solutions to inequality and poverty that actually target inequality and poverty, because we believe in a better country, not in a BEE country.
I will take it that the honorable member is finished because he just switched off the mic without saying. Honorable members, that concludes the debate. We will now move and proceed to the last item on the order paper, which is a subject for discussion in the name of Honorable MK Molefe on protecting Parliament's constitutional role and fiscal integrity from extra-parliamentary initiatives and national dialogues. I will now recognize Honorable Molefe.
Thank you, Chairperson. I'll be taking the debate.
Continue, Honorable Member.
Okay, Chair. Honorable members, Chair, honorable members, and the people of South Africa, we want to see, okay, we What we see in South Africa today is what the ANC's intention to delegitimize Parliament as a legislative arm mandated to protect the interest of South Africans. The constitutional democracy and fiscal responsibility are being imperiled by the surge of executive-driven extra-parliamentary activities masquerading as national dialogue. We, as the People's Party and Umkhonto weSizwe, believe that it is our responsibility, constitutional duty, and moral imperative to confront these threats, to defend Parliament's integrity, and to protect Parliament's constitutional role and fiscal integrity. Madam Chair, Section 42(3) and Section 55(2) of our Constitution states that Parliament is a central forum for national debate, oversight, and formulation of policy. All national consultative process, whether those that address national economic, social challenges, fiscal considerations, must be echoed in the chambers of Parliament as a legislative armed by our Constitution. However, we see today the so-called national dialogues launched outside formal structures of Parliament. These are not constitutionally sanctioned initiatives, but coordinated projects run parallel to established democratic structures and that hollow out Parliament's rightful mandate. Chair, these extra parliamentary activities are often coordinated without a legal and budgetary foundation, draw funds away from our core constitutional priorities. This year, the so-called GNU convened a national dialogue with an estimated cost of 485 million and will not be accounted for. Those funds would have helped cap unemployment fund programs that could capacitate youth, but instead they were used to fund a national dialogue that has no alignment with the medium-term development plan, no policy justification, and no budgetary transparency. A national dialogue in a country with a 68% poverty rate in 2025 is nothing but an expansive political exercise which it maintains interest to channel scarce public funds into unaccountable hands, operating outside the reach of Parliament and Auditor General. There is no justification for such wasteful expenditure. Rather, they indicate how the GNU hell-bent on breaching Parliament's constitutional and fiscal obligation. Madam Chair, the legitimacy of Parliament lies in its representation of our people's will. Parliament has constitutionally sanctioned mechanisms that all public participation, these sectoral parliaments, joint ad hoc committees, community engagement processes. These processes are all subject to law and open to accountability. However, these extra parliamentary dialogue offer a contrast in duplication, confusion, and the erosion of public trust in government and democracy. And through evading parliamentary process, these dialogues open a space where there is no financial accountability. As MK Party, we cannot be surprised. We still have a sitting president that has avoided prosecution, even though millions were found inside the couch in his Palapala game farm. These extra parliamentary initiatives, national dialogue, serve as a vehicle for exploitation of our resources that could change the outlook of South Africa's economy and improve the livelihood of our people that remain as an economic spectators instead of being participants. As MK Party chairperson, we recommend that all initiatives of national interest must be coordinated and implemented in accordance with the rules of the National Assembly and constitutional precept for fiscal discipline and transparent governance as outlined in Section 2151 of the Constitution. The MK Party recommends also that Parliament affirms its role and legitimacy and legitimate authority as a central institution for national consultation, democratic dialogue, and oversight. Parliament must ensure all governance processes remain accountable to the people through transparent and constitutionally grounded mechanisms. Also includes Parliament rejecting any deviation and misuse of parliament or public funds towards illegitimate extra-parliamentary activities that fall outside the established national priorities, policy frameworks, and approved budgetary processes. The MK Party calls on the Speaker to ensure that no parallel initiative, program, and expenditure proceeds without full parliamentary scrutiny, accountability, and formal approval in line with the principles of transparency and good governance. As I conclude, Madam Chair, to safeguard South Africa's democracy, Parliament must assert its constitutional supremacy, protect the public resources, and serve as the only credible platform for national dialogue. Any other path risks eroding our mandate, our resources, and ultimately our democracy itself. I thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much, Honorable Member. I will now recognize Honorable Suprati.
Thank you, Honorable House Chair, Honorable members and fellow South Africans. Good morning to you and Assalamu alaikum. Honorable House Chair, the Constitution of our country established a unitary, sovereign democratic state with three arms: the judiciary, the parliament, and the executive. Further, it states that these arms of the state will operate independently and oversee each other's functions. In essence, all these arms of state have powers they exercise, but they must do so in line with the Constitution without undermining the authority of each other. House Chair, the topic we are called to reflect on today, protecting Parliament's role in fiscal integrity from extra-parliamentary initiatives and national dialogues, assumes that Parliament is not founded and backed by the Constitution. Parliament, Honorable House Chair, needs no protection from no one, and certainly not from the national dialogue, which is an initiative of government aimed at continuing with a long living legacy of inclusive democracy in South Africa. Perhaps to kick off today, let's reflect on the profound role of our Parliament, a beacon of democracy, a voice for the people, and a guardian of our nation's constitutional values. Parliament's foundation is deep-rooted in the will of the people, as enshrined in the Constitution of the Republic of South Africa. The preamble, Chairperson, of the Constitution begins with a powerful clarion that, and I quote, "We, the people of South Africa," unquote, affirming that the authority of the state emanates from the collective will of its citizens. This principle reflects the democratic values of universal suffrage, of equality, and participation, hard-won through decades of struggle against oppression. Now, the ideals of the Freedom Charter of 1955, which declared, and I quote, "The people shall govern," laid the foundation for a democratic South Africa, where the government is accountable to the people and their needs. This year, we also remember, House Chair, the 106th birthday of Oliver Reginald Tambo, a towering figure in our struggle for liberation. Born on the 27th of October 1917, President Reginald Tambo dedicated his life to the fight for justice, for equality, and for the freedom of all South Africans. His unwavering commitment to democracy and his vision for a united, free, and peaceful South Africa must continue to inspire us today. Now, House Chair, the constitutional mandate of Parliament is clear, as outlined in Chapter 4 of the Constitution. Parliament represents the people, Parliament passes laws, Parliament oversees the executive, and it ensures accountability. Section 42, subsection 3 of the Constitution states, and I quote, "The National Assembly is elected to represent the people and to ensure government by the people under the Constitution," unquote. Parliament is the cornerstone of our democracy, forming part of three interconnected spheres of government: national, provincial, and local, that collectively ensure that the needs of our people are met. As the legislative arm of government, Parliament drives the system by again passing laws, by overseeing the executive, and by representing the people in their diversity and in their unity. Yet, Honorable House Chair, we must never forget that Parliament does not replace the people in a democracy. It is a channel through which the collective will of the nation is expressed. The people, Honorable House Chair, remain the ultimate custodians of democracy, and Parliament must act in their best interest, ensuring that their voices are heard and their needs are met. Our Constitution explicitly recognizes the sovereignty of the people, stating in Section 1, subsection D, that South Africa is founded on, and I quote, universal adult suffrage, a national common voters' roll, regular elections, and a multi-party system of democratic government to ensure accountability, responsiveness, and openness, unquote. No extra parliamentary initiative can abdicate the constitutional responsibility of Parliament. Whilst external dialogues and initiatives may foster unity and address societal challenges, they must never undermine the authority or the integrity of this institution. Parliament, Honorable House Chair, is the heart of our democracy, and its oversight and accountability are essential to safeguarding the fiscal and constitutional integrity of our nation. We take great pride, Honorable House Chair, in having an activist People's Parliament, which ensures public participation and accountability through various platforms, including, but certainly not limited to, live streaming parliamentary sessions, taking Parliament to the people championed by the NCOP, the Youth Parliament, the Women's Parliament, the People's Assembly Initiative, public participation mechanisms, regular public hearings, promotion to access to information act, enabling our people to access government information and hold Parliament accountable. Now, House Chair, as we move forward, let us be reminded of the words of President O.R. Tambo that, and I quote again, the fight for freedom must go on until it is won. Until our country is free and happy and peaceful as part of the community of man, we cannot rest, unquote. Honorable House Chair, with courage, with conviction, and with an unyielding commitment to the people we serve, we can ensure that the promise of democracy is fulfilled for every South African. And as I draw to conclusion, House Chair, the national dialogue is in line with the foundations of this country. It is about getting a country which has been living for 31 years to reflect on itself, to interrogate its wrongs, and to come up with tangible solutions and build consensus towards the next prosperous future. The national dialogue, it is about giving an ear to the most forgotten people in the corners of our country. It is not a threat to Parliament, but indeed it is an opportunity we must seize and we must embrace. Honorable House Chair, let us rise to this challenge together, and I thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Member. We'll now move, and I recognize Honorable Manyi.
Thank you, House Chair. Honorable members, the MK Party rises to send a clear, unambiguous, and uncompromising message. Parliament is not a spectator sport. It is the supreme democratic forum of the Republic, established by the people for the people, and not for ceremonial audience for executive vanity projects disguised as national dialogue. What we're witnessing here, Chair, is a calculated attempt to outsource democracy, to shift the center of the public debate away from this House, the constitutional heartbeat of the nation, into hotel boardrooms, NGO panels, and media stages financed by public funds. That must not be allowed. Chairperson, this so-called national dialogue represents nothing less than a constitutional betrayal. It has no legal standing, no policy basis, and no fiscal mandate. It appears nowhere in the key priorities of the medium-term development plan, except as a cursory mention on some narrow issue of race relations. It is not in the Division of Revenue Act or the estimates of the national expenditure. It is not subject to parliamentary oversight, nor to be audited by the Auditor General. Guvula's book, that, honorable members, is the very definition of unconstitutional expenditure or codified looting. The quiet re-emergence of elite patronage that hollowed out our state in the first place. We've seen this movie before. Commissions, summits, envoys, and dialogues branded as nation building, yet used as pipelines for contracts, consultants, and political favor. The Zondo Commission alone cost taxpayers over $1 billion. Its findings are busy gathering dust. And now the same government that ignored those recommendations wants another round of talk shops, no accountability, no budget approval, no shame. This is fiscal hypocrisy in a bankrupt state. Chair, South Africa is broke. Our nation debt now stands at 5.21 trillion for the financial year 23-24 and is projected to rise to approximately 6.29 trillion by 26-27. With interest payments already consuming 385 billion every year, more than what we spend on policing and public health combined. The government says there's no money to increase salaries of civil servants, no money for teaching posts, no money for clinics, no money to employ doctors, no money for township infrastructure, no money to develop rural areas, no money to fight crime, no money to reduce the killing of NERSA tariffs. Yet somehow, there's money for dialogues that duplicate Parliament's constitutional mandate. How does one justify that? Is President Mbeki trying to return to power? Or has the ANC just thought of a looting strategy to fund the local government elections which they are poised to lose? Which is which? When the presidential hotline on its own, or shall I say cold line, resolves only 3% of cases in the Northern Cape, 8% in Mpumalanga, and when 41% of municipalities are in financial distress. Honorable Chair, what moral authority does this ANC-CR faction have to convene dialogues when unemployment is sitting at 33%, when the youth unemployment is sitting at 44%, and when 18 million South Africans depend on social grants just to survive? These are not just statistics. They are the pulse of the nation abandoned. What is being sold to the public as a national consultation is in truth a democratic deception conjured up in smoke-filled rooms. This so-called dialogue is executive-driven, not people-driven. The steering wheel is in the union buildings, not grassroots. It is not the people's project. It is the elite's project. It is coordinated by consultant think tanks and civil society proxies who are not elected by anyone and are accountable to no one. Yet the public must pay for this. This is actually nonsensical. This is privatized democracy, government by subcontract. If the executive were serious about evidence-based governance, Honorable Chair, it would need no new dialogue. It would turn to Stats SA, a world-class public institution that already produces empirical evidence on every aspect of our society. Poverty, inequality, labor markets, education, service delivery, to name a few. Stats SA's quarterly labor force survey, living conditions survey, and general household survey, and provide all the data any serious government needs. not this gimmick. This is not research or genuine dialogue. It is a recreation project at taxpayers' expense. How disgraceful. Chairperson, it is precisely because of such deception that Parliament has both a fiscal and moral duty to act. Our Constitution demands that every cent of public money must advance transparency, accountability, and effective management. And this project fails on all four tests. It is not in the MDP as a key priority. It is not budgeted for, does not meet the requirements for budget adjustments or special appropriation, and not subject to any oversight mechanism. It's a tanki fair. Any funds channeled through the DPME to NEDLEC for this so-called national dialogue would therefore amount to irregular, wasteful, and unauthorized expenditure in violation of the PFMA. Parliament cannot be reduced to a bystander while the executive freelances with the national purse. This is absurd. We, the people's representatives, must defend our our Constitution's primacy and insist that all national consultation funded through public purse happen under this roof. I repeat, all national consultation funded capital F through public purse must happen under this roof in full public view, not in some places elsewhere, and under the discipline of parliamentary procedures. Or people must fundraise in Europe for their vanity projects and stage them in UNISA or Pala Farm. As we speak, Honorable Chair, the DPME has failed to account and give a cost breakdown of the reported 25 million of the 2 days, 15 and 16 August, on that curtain raising session they've had of this so-called dialogue. How much more for the projected over 500 million eyed by Minister Godongwana at the expense of real national priorities? This government must have some shame. For the MK party, this is not just a procedural matter. It's a matter of principle. We reject, without hesitation, any attempt to create parallel structures of consultation that bypass Parliament. This country is not short of dialogues. It is short of implementation, accountability, and political honesty. Over the past decade, more than 20 billion has been spent on summits, envoys, conferences, and commissions. From NEDLEC in Davos to presidential investment conferences, where normal capexes are called pledges. And yet, after all that, youth unemployment remains at 44%. Inequality is worse than in apartheid days. What a shame. And the cost of load shedding in South Africa since 2018 has been substantial, with estimates for the 2020-2023 period alone reaching approximately 224 billion in lost economic activity. Still, the executive behaves as if another dialogue will rescue it from its own policy paralysis. This is not a national consultation. It is a political theater by an administration that has run out of ideas and moral legitimacy.
Honorable Manyi, your time has expired.
Thank you.
Thank you. I will now recognize Honorable Bateman.
Good morning, colleagues, Honourable House Chair, Honourable members and fellow South Africans. Our topic this morning is how to protect Parliament's role and fiscal integrity from extra-parliamentary initiatives and national dialogues. This is quite a mouthful and it can be interpreted in different ways.
My
The DA has
apologies, Honourable
opposed.
Bateman. My apologies. Honorable Manye, can you please mute?
Oh, sorry.
Shall I start again, Honorable Chair?
Please. Yeah, I'll use my discretion. You can start again.
Honorable House Chair, honorable members, and fellow South Africans. Our topic this morning is how to protect Parliament's role and fiscal integrity from extra parliamentary initiatives and national dialogues. This is quite a mouthful and it can be interpreted in different ways. The DA has opposed the national dialogue from the outset, but there have been some extra parliamentary initiatives which have been a support to Parliament by exposing corruption and proposing reforms. And this is the angle I would like to explore this morning. For example, 5 years ago, Judge Mpati gave us a raft of recommendations to reform the Public Investment Corporation. Some of these have been implemented. Unfortunately, others have not. Our job as Parliament is to hold the executive to account, making sure that the recommendations of commissions such as the Mpati Commission are in fact implemented according to their merits. The Minister of Finance stated earlier this year that he is committed to holding to account the delinquent directors of the PIC and its investment companies like Daybreak Foods. He's also committed to reforming the PIC Act to enable the appointment of an independent non-executive chairperson and other Mpati recommendations. We shall hold him to his word. Mpati also recommended transparency in relation to the PIC's unlisted investments, including the disclosure of underlying beneficial owners. This has not yet been implemented, but we must insist that this is implemented because it'll make corruption more difficult. House Chair, the most famous of extra-parliamentary initiatives was the Zondo Commission, established by Mr. Zuma when he was the president. Initially, Mr. Zuma opposed the instruction to launch the commission, but eventually he was compelled to by an order of the court. It's not surprising that Mr. Zuma was opposed to this particular extra-parliamentary initiative because the Zondo Commission went on to find that Mr. Zuma himself had been a central figure in enabling the capture of the state. The Zondo Commission found that the ANC government of the day also enabled state capture by protecting former President Zuma and failing to deal properly with allegations of corruption and capture until it was too late. The Commission further found that the ANC's policy of cadre deployment provided fertile ground for corruption and state capture to take place. The evidence presented in the Commission's reports shows that state capture involved different networks that cohered around certain individuals, in particular former President Zuma. Mr. Zuma refused to appear before the Zondo Commission, leading to his conviction for contempt of court in 2021 and a 15-month prison sentence, which rendered him ineligible to stand for Parliament last year. Former Chief Justice Zondo said that it pained him when he had to swear in cabinet ministers last year who had severe state capture findings against them. We urge the President still to relieve them of their posts. There's also a member of this House who was described in the Zondo Commission as one of the primary architects and implementers of state capture during his tenure as CEO of a prominent state-owned company. It's reported that he, and I quote, facilitated the conclusion of irregular contracts at inflated prices, variously through deviations, improper confinements, and the changing of tender evaluation criteria in order to facilitate entry for companies involved in the extensive money laundering scheme to the advantage of Gupta companies. In other words, he fiddled supply chain processes to enrich the Guptas. I find it ironic that the debate today about how we should be protecting Parliament from extra-parliamentary initiatives such as the Zondo Commission has been sponsored by this very person, and that he is representing the MK party, which is led by Mr. Zuma, who would likely be in Parliament today were it not for the commendable work of the Zondo Commission. It seems, therefore, to me that extra-parliamentary initiatives like the Zondo Commission pose far less threat to Parliament than they do to corrupt politicians. The existence of the Commission, however, does not absolve Parliament of our responsibility to hold the executive to account, as Zondo also emphasized. We welcome, therefore, the establishment of an ad hoc committee to probe the Nkwenazi allegations in parallel with the Madlanga Commission. Parliament has a duty to ensure that the recommendations of the various commissions are properly evaluated and implemented according to their merits. We spent nearly 1 billion rand on the Zondo Commission, and yet there have been very few prosecutions. Similarly, there's been very little real accountability for the rogue actors at the PIC. We must ensure that the executive investigates and prosecutes the crimes that these commissions have brought to light. Zondo recommended an independent anti-corruption agency with the power to investigate and prosecute. The President did establish the Investigating Directorate Against Corruption, but this is within the NPA, and so it's not truly independent. For all the recommendations of the commissions, such as these, we need to insist on transparent updates from the executive at least once every 6 months. That's what any functioning parliament worth its salt would do. And so the real questions we should be debating today are not how we should be protecting Parliament from these commissions, but rather why are the recommendations of the commissions not being implemented? And how can we let the executive get away with promoting people implicated in state capture to cabinet positions and then protecting them? That's what it means to protect Parliament's constitutional role. I thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Member. We will now move to EFF. I did not
Thank you
get
so
the name again.
Thank you so much, Chair. Chair, our evolution from colonialism and apartheid to the new democratic dispensation was underpinned by a commitment to the rule of law, equality, and the supremacy of constitutional values, whose aim was to place the people as a whole at the pinnacle of decision-making about the future of this country. That the Constitution did by ensuring that all conduct, be it from the executive, the legislature, and the judiciary itself, is viewed from the sacrosanct positioning of the Constitution and subjected to it. Chair, Parliament as an institution is the ultimate expression of the will of the people, and it is the people who elect parties that send representatives to this very institution. The institution makes laws within the prescripts of the Constitution, and no other institution can make these laws because Parliament is the only institution elected by the people of this country for that purpose. It is Parliament that must have mechanisms for subjecting executive conduct to scrutiny, and keep the executive accountable to it, and by extension to the people of South Africa. While there is general consensus that our democratic project has been derailed, and in certain instances hijacked by counter-revolutionary forces and those who seek to engender their sectarian interests and force those interests to be the interest of the country as a whole, it remains the high calling of Parliament to affirm its role as the voice of the people. Chair, initiatives such as the so-called national dialogue can never and must never be allowed to render Parliament useless or waste public money. We are constantly told that there is no money, that we must manage the fiscals, reduce debt, and tighten our belts. Yet suddenly there are millions and millions for a so-called national dialogue. If money is available, why not use it to hire more police officers to protect our children in the K Flats, Hangover Park, Delft, Nyanga, and Mfuleni, who are being gunned down daily? Why are we not allocating additional funding to education to hire more teachers when public classrooms are overcrowded with more than 50 learners, while private schools have 15 or 20 per class? Chair, why are we not hiring more nurses, rebuilding our defense force, renovating the dilapidated Tabachwani, and investing in affordable electricity if indeed the state has no money? Over the years, Parliament has in fact undertaken serious work to evaluate the progress made since 1994. Amongst this was the appointment of the high-level panel led by the former President Ntate Motlanthe, who was tasked with evaluating the impact of legislation since 1994 and of the factors preventing the country from driving fundamental change. Chair, the report tabled various recommendations on a number of areas, including on land, on the economy, on traditional leaders. That is the role of Parliament, and Parliament should ensure that work, such as the work of the high-level panel, does not get ignored and its recommendations are implemented. It therefore, Chairperson, can never be right that state funds which ought to be used for the needs of our people is directed to fund civil society-driven initiatives that seek to dictate to Parliament and the state from outside. This, if we allow it to happen, will be the ultimate abortion of our nascent democracy. would be allowing forces whose agendas we do not know to dictate the direction of our country, making elections a meaningless exercise, and rendering parliament a redundant institution. While the real power to determine the direction of the country rests with a tiny group of the so-called civil society organization. For parliament to do this, we must not only safeguard the independence of this institution from outside influences, we must also perform our constitutional duties with integrity. This means that, Chair, when reports from credible panels, such as the independent panel on Phala Phala, are tabled, Parliament is not blinded by partisan interest, but is guided by commitment to constitutional values. This also means that there must be a renewed commitment to never again provide protection to constitutional delinquents, such as this Parliament did to Ntate Jacob Zuma and is not doing to Ntate Cyril Ramaphosa. Both these two people were able and are still able to bypass parliament scrutiny because they themselves were and are agents of external forces seeking to undermine our democratic project. Parliament must never be co-opted into these shady deals under the pretext of partisanship. This also means that we must not shy away from making laws, and that we must not make it a norm that we are forced by the very same civil society actors to make certain laws through the use of their power to litigate endlessly. And this powerhouse, Chair, to initiate legislation must not only be left to the executive exclusively. Parliament must pass private members' bills that are supported by the majority of the parties in this House. Chair, as Nelson Mandela once said during his debate speech in 1995, and I quote, "History has so decreed that our comprehensive task of transforming South African society should take place through constitutional and legislative means, and not by decree. We are fortunate in this regard because our unique settlement has afforded our country such outstanding cooperation among various political forces," end quote. Therefore, House Chair, we also affirm that the development of this country must and will happen through democratic means and not through counter-revolutionary pacts made outside of this sacred house. I thank you, House Chair.
Thank you very much, Honorable Member. I will now recognize Honorable Hadebe.
Thank you, House Chairperson. Parliament bears the crucial responsibility of fostering public participation, cooperative governance, and international engagements. In doing so, and
Sorry, Honorable Hadebe. Honorable Tito, please continue, Honorable Member.
Thank you, House Chairperson. Parliament bears the crucial responsibility of fostering public participation, cooperative governance, and international engagements. In doing so, it must remain steadfast in upholding the fundamental values of our democracy: human dignity, equality, non-racialism, non-sexism, and the supremacy of the Constitution. The IFP recognizes that in previous administrations, Parliament was not effective in carrying out its constitutional mandate. This resulted in a litigation culture. However, it is important to note that the IFP and its members of Parliament have and will continue to ensure that Parliament remains the true voice of all South Africans, especially the poor, the voiceless, and the excluded. Thus, as South Africans continue to place their trust in the IFP and send its representatives to Parliament, they are also entrusting the party to safeguard Parliament's constitutional role. The IFP has consistently demonstrated through its values and track record that it is a party committed to upholding the rule of law. During the budget vote for Parliament, Honorable Speaker of the National Assembly accurately captured one of the core roles of these institutions when she stated that Parliament is the guardian of the use of public resources and its judgment. In its judgment, the Constitutional Court described Parliament as the watchdog of state resources, the enforcer of fiscal discipline, and cost effectiveness for the common good of all our people. This characterization of Parliament places a higher threshold in terms of financial accountability, transparency, and prudence. It underscores the expectations that Parliament must not only oversee the use of public resources by the executive, but also exemplify the very principles of sound financial management it demands from others. The foresight of the architects of our Constitution is truly commendable. Our constitutional democracy is rooted in transparency and accountability. This means that the fiscal integrity of Parliament is not confidential. Like all other government departments, its budget is subject to a formal vote. Its spending priorities are transparent, and questions may be raised regarding its expenditure patterns. In relation to the national dialogue, the IFP remains firmly committed to supporting it. Our support reflects an understanding of the importance of inclusive engagement among all participating organizations, because as IFP leader, Honorable Minister Velenkosini Hlabisa stated, I quote, "The national dialogue must answer questions left unanswered by the CODESA, including the issue of land restitution." Furthermore, the national dialogue presents a platform to further canvass the issue of the roles, functions, and responsibilities of Amakhosi, the traditional leaders that remained unresolved at CODESA. Honorable Chairperson, Parliament's constitutional role is safeguarded by the supreme law of our land. The national dialogue does not replace the mandate entrusted to us by the citizens. However, our country needs an open and honest conversation, and whenever and wherever our people are, Parliament must also be present. I thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Member. I will now recognize Patriotic Alliance.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. Honourable Speaker, honourable members, and fellow South Africans, good afternoon. We gathered here today at a defining moment in our democracy. Our nation stands at a crossroad. At the decision we make now, it will shape the future for generations to come. I rise on behalf of the Patriotic Alliance, not as a party seeking power, but as a voice for the ordinary South Africans, for every father, mother, worker, and young person who believes in the rule of law, in accountability, and in a parliament that truly serves its people. Our parliament is the heart of our democracy. It is where the people's voices are heard and transformed into law. It is where government must answer for how the people's money is being spent. Our constitution gives Parliament the sacred duty. We must defend it. Yet today, we see worrying signs. There are growing calls for national dialogue and other initiatives that seeks to bypass Parliament. Let us be clear. No unelected forum, no private structure, and no political shortcut can ever replace the People's Parliament. When we allow decisions about our country's future to happen behind closed doors, we weaken democracy. We replace open debate with secret deals. We silence the people's voice in the chamber and replace it with the loudest voice on the street. We will not allow that. This also threatens another foundation of our stability, physical integrity. Every rand in our national treasury belongs to the people. It must be used for service delivery, jobs, health, education, and the uplift of the most vulnerable. When money is spent outside Parliament's oversight, it escapes public accountability. That opens the door to waste, corruption, and failed promises. As South Africans have already paid the price too high. The Patriotic Alliance says, not on our watch. We stand for the mother in Gqeberha who needs a clinic, for the graduate in Soweto who needs a job, for the farmer in the Free State who needs to feed our nation. Their future depends on a parliament that works and a treasury that is protected. So the call is simple. First, let us defend our parliament, hold our representatives accountable at the ballot box, not through structures with no democracy mandates. Second, let us protect the people's money. Every cent must be approved, monitored, and accounted for through constitutional channels. Fellow South Africans, the path to a better future is not by breaking down our current democracy, but by strengthening it. Let us stand together, one nation, one people, under one constitution. Let us protect our parliament, our constitution, and the integrity of our public finances, for they are the foundation of the South Africa we all deserve. I thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Member. I will now proceed and recognize Dr. Poshoff.
Thank you, Honourable House Chair. When someone refers to protecting Parliament's constitutional role and fiscal integrity, two concepts come to mind. The one revolves around one's view of the ideal state, the other around state capability on which Parliament has to legislate and to oversee. Some parties, including the ANC, MK and EFF, are intellectually and emotionally really invested in the idea of a strong centralized state. According to that view, any form of federalism or confederalism is an aberration and should be guarded against. This view leads to centralization in all possible spheres and an expectation that provinces and municipalities should take their cue from a national source, whether it be union buildings or the Thule House. This approach is harmful to South Africa. Other multicultural African countries like Ethiopia, Kenya, and Tanzania have realized that stability is created by accommodating diversity in a federal dispensation rather than denying it in a unitary system. It seems as if the ideologies of African nationalism and Pan-Africanism still do not allow these parties to recognize this. Therefore, they insist on putting the whole population in their own ideological straitjacket. In fact, a Republican political dispensation is based on power which is shared and distributed. It recognizes the independent political roles of different spheres of government and civic organizations, even national dialogues. This is not a threat to the state. It creates a building blocks of a state where the winner never takes it all and the loser never loses everything. The reality is, in South Africa, is that the state continually do less and that Parliament has less to oversee because the state is less and less capable. It is hollowed out as a result of its own incapability. Normally, the state has a monopoly over the legal use of violence and uses it to maintain order. In South Africa, there are more security guards than policemen, and in many instances, they are more effective. The state cannot limit independent education because it does not have the capacity to do the job alone. Citizens repair their roads where municipalities can't. Without private electricity generation, we would still have had load shedding. What maintains stability if the state loses capacity at the current rate? Parallel extra parliamentary initiatives do so. These initiatives cushion citizens from the most harmful impact of the incapable state. However, the opposite can also happen. Ruthless role players can exploit the situation to their personal advantage. Those who sabotage water systems to provide water trucks, those who hijack building or demand a portion of every construction project in exchange for, well, nothing except for keeping your life. In short, the mafias can take control. As long as these extra parliamentary initiatives, positive or negative, don't directly challenge Parliament's authority, we can meet and we can speak to our heart's desire, but it will increasingly be an unconvincing charade. Therefore, maybe we should rather have an appreciation for extra parliamentary initiatives and not devising ways in which to combat it or to make it disappear. I thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Member. We will now move and recognize Honorable James.
Thank you, Speaker. Speaker, our constitution is clear. Parliament is the voice of the people of South Africa. It is the institution through which the people exercise their will, debate in the nation's direction, and hold government to account. Yet increasingly, decisions that shape our democracy are being made outside these walls in presidential dialogues, special summits, and so-called national compacts. While such initiatives may claim to promote unity, they risk doing something far more dangerous. They sideline the very institution through which the people speak. The Constitution vests legislative authority in Parliament, not in presidential roundtables. It entrusts this House with the power to authorize expenditure, to scrutinize the executive, and to ensure that every rand spent serves the public good. When majority policy decisions are made in national dialogues, and only presented here for rubber stamping, the constitutional balance between the executive and the legislature begins to tilt. We have seen this pattern before. The Presidential Social Compact on Economy Recovery made fiscal undertakings without parliamentary oversight. The so-called National Dialogue on...
Members, my apologies, Honorable James. Honorable members, can we please, when we come to the platform, can we please mute? Because we are disturbing the proceedings of this debate. Please continue, Honorable James.
Thank you, Speaker. The so-called National Dialogue on Coalition Governments discussed potential constitutional amendments outside this House, even as Parliament itself was tasked with considering similar legislation. Consultation is vital in any democracy, but consultation cannot replace representation. The people's mandate resides here, not in appointed panels or convened elites. Protecting Parliament's constitutional role also means protecting its fiscal integrity. When the executive enters into agreements that commit public resources without prior parliamentary approval, it undermines the power of the purse, one of the oldest principles of democratic accountability. If Parliament loses its fiscal authority, it loses its independence. Speaker, this is not about rejecting dialogue. It is about reaffirming democracy. True dialogue happens through our elected representatives in open committees in this chamber and under scrutiny of the South African public. As Action SA, we will defend Parliament's constitutional sovereignty against all attempts to reduce it to a spectator of governance, because when Parliament is diminished, the people are silenced. Let us therefore recommit to strengthening the institution that... Let us therefore recommit...
Honorable Tito, please, can you please respect these proceedings?
Let us therefore
my apologies.
Let us therefore recommit to strengthening the institution that embodies the will of South Africans and ensure that every policy, every fiscal decision, and every constitutional change is debated and decided where it belongs, in Parliament. I thank you. Thank you, Speaker.
Thank you, Honorable James. Thank you very much.
Members need manners.
ACDP. UDM. Rise. BOSA. ATM. Honorable Apiri from ANC.
Honorable House Chair, thanks very much, and my apology for not opening my video. Honorable House Chair, the national dialogue announced by the President and administered by NETLEC is a vital initiative aimed at fostering inclusive and participatory engagement on South Africa's most pressing socio-economic issues. We believe that it goes to the heart of our nation's democratic character and developmental future. Its significance lies in providing a formal platform where government, business, labor, and community stakeholders can collaboratively reflect, discuss, and develop solutions to complex national challenges confronting our people. It institutionalizes a culture of engagement where diverse voices, perspectives, and experiences shape policy decisions and underscores the government's commitment to inclusive governance, social cohesion, and sustainable development. Honorable Chair, this platform is particularly important in the context of South Africa's social economic landscape, characterized by stagnant economic growth, inequalities, and structural challenges that require broad consensus to address effectively. As the ANC, we have always committed ourselves to nation building, and the dialogue promotes a shared understanding of issues such as economic reform, social justice, and employment creation. It is our belief that through sustained, meaningful engagements, the national dialogue is aimed at building trust among our stakeholders, strengthen social partnerships, and facilitate the development of holistic strategies that are responsive to the needs of all sectors of society. Honorable House Chair, the 700 million that is allocated for the support of the national dialogue is not an expenditure, but an investment by government as a strategic tool in nation building. The resources will support various components, including capacity building, modernization of system, and digital platform, facilitation of dialogue sessions, and the commissioning of research to inform policy outcomes. The budget also enables NETLEC to enhance its operational efficiency, expand outreach, and deepen engagement with diverse social partners across the country. The budget, Honorable Chair, also emphasizes the importance of strengthening social dialogue through the support of partnerships and multi-stakeholder engagement. Resources are directed towards innovative communication tools, stakeholder capacity development, and organizing platforms that allow for transparent and inclusive discussions. Therefore, we are hopeful that these efforts will ensure that dialogue is more accessible, effective, and enduring, thereby ensuring that the policy decisions are well informed, broadly support, and capable of delivering sustainable social and economic outcomes. Honorable Chair, it is important that we recognize the long-term effect of the dialogue, which is strategic investment in peace, stability, and growth of South Africa, which justifies the budget allocated. This will provide the foundation for ongoing dialogues on critical issues such as social protection and economic diversification. By prioritizing dialogue and ensuring adequate funding, the government seeks to embed a culture of continuous engagement, consensus building, and social partnership, thus laying the groundwork for resilient and inclusive development pathways. Our responsibility as members of parliament and South African citizens is not to simply observe the dialogue, but to support and strengthen it and to ensure that it translates into real change that our people deserve. The national dialogue is a platform where all South Africans, regardless of class, ideology, or background, can shape the future of our country. In conclusion, Madam Chair, the national dialogue administered by NETLEC holds considerable significance as a mechanism for inclusive governance and social cohesion. The allocated budget demonstrates a serious commitment to fostering sustained engagement among all social partners. With these resources, the initiative aims to transform dialogue into tangible policy outcomes, address key national challenges, and promote social stability and economic resilience, this country's future. I thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Honorable Member. We'll now move to Al-Jama, NCC, PAC, UAT, Good, Honorable Alexander from TA.
Good morning, Chair.
Morning, please proceed.
Chair, let me tell you about Mrs. Khumalo. She's a nurse at Charlotte Maxeke Hospital in Johannesburg. For 6 months now, when she comes home from Yeoville after night shifts, there is no water, not a drop. So instead of sleeping, she waits. And sometimes the water comes on at noon, sometimes at 6, sometimes not at all. So she's buying bottled water that she cannot really afford to flush her own toilets. And in 2022, government launched its National Infrastructure Plan 2050, which promised billions of water projects. High-profile summits and dialogues followed, hosted in luxury venues, attended by experts, and filled to commit to integrated water management solutions. Yet, while these events produce glossy frameworks and PowerPoint presentations, taps in Joburg remain dry. Communities queue at water tankers, hospitals ration supplies, and outrage is streaked across the city from Randburg to Yeoville. The question is simple. If there's money for summits and strategies, why is there no water in the taps? And that's the question that demands an answer, because South Africa demands an answer. Chair, is that summits aren't about solving the water crisis. They're about avoiding accountability in Parliament. They're about creating the illusion of actions for people who are suffering. Right now, as I speak, Randburg residents have been without water for 11 days, Bryanston for 1 week, Auckland Park, Melville and Westdean are on water rotations. Thousands are living like Mrs. Khumalo's nightmare. And this isn't just the poor areas, this is citywide. This is Sandton, this is the richest square mile in Africa. But here's the con. In 2022, the government launched the National Infrastructure Plan and committed billions, hundreds of billions, over 10 years for infrastructure, which included water projects. And now, where are those water pipes in Joburg? We don't know, because it doesn't come to Parliament for appropriations. And in 2023, the Water Summit was held. Consultants were paid, frameworks developed, but Mrs. Khumalo, taps are still dry. In 2024, Gauteng's Water Task Team coordinated responses, Randburg residents still filling buckets from tankers. Summits, task teams, dialogues, frameworks, but zero water is flowing. And here's what makes the situation infuriating. Hundreds of millions of rands are being directed to the so-called stakeholder engagement and proceeded to feasibility studies. This money could have delivered real solutions instead of empty promises. What amount could have been done for water pipes in Joburg, pump stations, and thousands of leaks could have been repaired, delivering actual water to people. Instead, it's brought PowerPoint presentations in fancy hotel room while Mrs. Khumalo is still buying water. And next month, the Global South Water and Sanitation Dialogue will be held at Emperor's Palace in Kempton Park, which will bring together 1,500 delegates to discuss water security and infrastructure development. While recommendations will be made and pledges announced, just a few kilometers down the road, in the inner city, communities like Hillbrow will still be queuing for water after days without supply. And here's what should terrify every member in this House. While Joburg fails in water delivery, we can haul in the executive to Parliament, demand answers, withhold funding. That's accountability. But when the national dialogue fails, who will be held accountable? Nobody. No parliamentary oversight, no budget vote, no consequences, and they're committing your money without Parliament's approval. There have been billions that are committed for interventions. but they don't go through votes, and no one is held accountable to scrutinize the plan. One more picture, Chair. Here's the reality. In May of this year, a major Rand water pipe burst that left hospitals like Chris Baragwanath and without water for almost 3 days. Emergency wards relied on tankers, hygiene protocols were compromised, and surgeries delayed. Staff were using sanitizers because the taps were dry. And in the same month, government hosted the National Water and Sanitation in Durban in the Gallagher Conference Estate in Midrand. Hundreds of delegates discussing integrated service delivery models while frameworks were being debated, healthcare facilities were scrambling for water. This is the disconnect. High-level dialogues continue, but critical services collapse when pipes fail. People are dying while the government is dialoguing. Now, we're not saying that consultation is important, but consultation should inform Parliament. It shouldn't replace Parliament. Talk to the engineers, the water experts, the communities, but bring it to this House. Table the budget, show us the plans, the costs, the timelines, and let's vote. Creating a public record, while this government does not hide behind multi-stakeholder processes to avoid hard questions. When we demand answers, they say, we're addressing this through the presidential task team. Translation, we're avoiding accountability. But here's what we demand. 1, that any commitment to spend money must be tabled in Parliament. No announcements and summits, table it here with a vote and a plan. 2, Treasury must give a directive. No department may commit their funds through announcements and summits without parliamentary appropriation. If the minister wants billions for water pipes, bring it to Parliament for a vote. 3, every summit outcome must be proposed to Parliament as a proposed legislation or appropriation, not just talk. This is what the Constitution requires. We are just demanding that government follows it. We do not need another summit or a framework. What we need is water for the people when they turn on their taps. We need government to fix the pipes or resign. So here, Mr. Speaker, is fix the pipes. And if you can't, come to Parliament and tell us why. Tell us what it cost, tell us who's responsible, and tell us who should keep their jobs. The people in Joburg are filling their buckets right now. Residents are queuing at tankers. Hospital staff can't wash their hands, and Joburg's richest city in Africa is without water. Not because there's a drought, but because government is failing. And the failure is hidden behind the summits, the cost of millions, and deliver nothing. The Parliament will not be sidelined. We cannot watch silently while democracy is drowned in dialogues and basic services collapse. Speaker, I move to reclaim our constitutional authority for every nurse, every resident queuing at a tanker, every South African who elected us to ensure that their taps are turned on in Joburg and actual water flows. I thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Member. I will now recognize Honorable Dagmo.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, House Chair. I hope that I'm audible.
Yes, you are.
I think it's very interesting, House Chair, that this particular subject for debate was brought by the MKP at a very late stage. So it seems to me that they were not particularly clear as to actually what they wanted to come and debate in the House today. And what I find quite astounding is that the honourable member of the MKP, who then replaced Honourable Molefe, talks about a notion of a moral imperative. Now, House Chair, we don't need to be reminded that this particular party has amongst its members a judge who was proven factually, to a former judge, to go and attempt to influence other judges to protect former President Zuma. You have one of those members in this House, and yet that particular member talks about the need for a moral imperative. That particular party, called the MKP, also has members in this House who are actually facing charges directly emanating from the Commission of State Capture, yet they want to come here and talk about moral imperatives. Honorable Manye, who also spoke for the MKP here today, talks about the hollowing out of the state. But when have you ever heard that honorable member even raise one call for those that were actually partly responsible for hollowing out the state, i.e. the Gupta brothers? When have you ever heard Honorable Manye call and support the call that those particular individuals need to come back to this country and explain how they hollowed out and stole from the people of South Africa? So when the MK party brings a debate like this, purportedly warning about the dangers of parliament sovereignty being undermined, etc., and yet they, in this very parliament, are clearly here to defend the corrupt legacy of the former president, and to not actually in any way use this parliament to hold those particular individuals accountable. And that's why it's clear that the MKP has already reached its ceiling and will go down from here. I also find it strange that Honorable Bateman, one of those parties like the MKP who is opposing the national dialogue, will talk about the PIC, but would never, for instance, mention the fact that a DA benefactor, the late Marcus Jooste, whose company Steinhoff benefited massively from the PAC and actually corruptly used those PIC funds. You would never hear Honorable Bateman talk about the fact that Marcus Jooste and Steinhoff actually funded the Democratic Alliance, in effect using money, pensioners' money from the Public Investment Corporation. But you would also then not hear Mr. Bateman, for instance, talk about the fact that they have a mayor in the Hessequa municipality, someone called Councillor Riddles, who is on tape as having urged housing beneficiaries to lie about their income so that they can qualify for housing subsidies. Yet he wants to come here and talk about the Zondo Commission. And while we're on that particular, I think when we have dialogue and when we have debate, it's important to seek truth through facts and to avoid what can be referred to as megaphone politics. Because Honorable Manye and also indirectly Honorable Bateman want to undermine the work that was done, or let's say the follow-through from the State Capture Commissioner. I think I would urge both of those members to actually read the report dated July 2025, which is what we should be doing as members of Parliament in terms of holding the executive to account. Because there, in that report, you will see that there are at least 218 recommendations that were made by the Zondo Commission. And in regard to those, 10 cases have already been finalized. There are 36 enrolled cases. And in fact, there have been a total of 6 guilty findings in regard to issues arising out of the Zondo Commission. And in fact, a total of 10 billion rand that has been recovered by the state, either through the SIU, and other agencies of the state. So people come here and raise particular things, not even having read updated reports, which is our responsibility as members of Parliament, and come and then, talk about this threat to Parliament. It's time that members actually sought truth through facts and actually acknowledge the work that was done. And why does the DA not act against the allegedly corrupt mayor in the Hessequa, who's encouraging people to abuse state funds by lying about their housing income? And I also think one thing that we should do is also to clarify this notion of appointments to the executive of people who've been mentioned in the Zondo Commission. We as the African National Congress have a very clear policy, and that is that if any of our members are charged with a serious offense, they step aside. It's one thing to be mentioned, but every person has the right to actually clear their name. But if they are charged, that is the policy of the African National Congress, and a policy which no other party in this House actually has. And I think it's important that we recognize that. The support of the IFP for the national dialogue is welcome. I can't quite understand why the EFF feels threatened by a national dialogue. And I would urge all of those parties that have held themselves outside of the dialogue to actually understand what they're missing. Because at the convention, if you look at the actual labs that were held, issues around land, the economy, issues about identity, health, and education, you might have a concern. But why not encourage your members to actually participate in the next phase, which will be ward-based dialogues? Our people are watching what's happening on the ad hoc committee of this parliament. They are watching what's happening in Madlanga. The dialogue is going to give opportunities at the ward level for people to actually raise serious issues about what has happened to the South African police and what has to be done to clean up the rot that is actually there, because we cannot protect anyone. We are seeking truth through facts. And I would urge those parties who define themselves out of the dialogue to actually encourage their members to get involved. The train is moving. And if you're not going to get onto the train, it's like that expression where they say here in the Western Cape, as die kar begin beweeg, dan begin die honde om te blaf. Ukuba imoto iyahamba, ne? Izinja ziyakala ukukonkota. So people should realize what they are missing. I think it's also important for us to understand that in terms of our constitution, and I would urge members to look at that section 43. The National Assembly has the right to legislate, and obviously that is policy at a national level. No one else, no dialogue. Those are all recommendations, but Parliament has that sovereignty.
Your time has expired. Thank you. I will now recognize our last speaker, who is Honorable Molefe.
No, thank you so much, Chairperson. Let's close this by saying...
Hi, Chair. Molefe, not Molefe.
Chair, please protect me.
You are protected, Honorable Mwali. I take note of that, Honorable Mautwe.
Chair, let's close this by saying to the ANC of Ramaphosa, a shadow of former liberation movement, has lost its moral compass and is desperately trying to abuse the public purse to resuscitate it from ICU. Game over to the ANC. Please clear your offices. MK is coming. And then to the DA, the thieves in suits who are busy stealing there in the Western Cape and protecting their masters who are not members of this house. And all they do today is all they did today is what they do best, which is to throw mud and slander and expose the ingrained racist posture. And then to the EFF, we welcome your progressive submission. However, we wish you well and a speedy recovery from the Zuma must fall narrative. And to the Action SA, thank you, and we welcome your bold submission. Chair, in conclusion, the issue at hand is not just about parliamentary procedure, it is about the very fabric of our democracy. The MK party stands firm in defense of our constitution, of our parliament, and the people we serve, and we will not stand idly while the executive branch undermines the legislative arm and erode public trust in our institutions. To our fellow South African, we say demand accountability, demand transparency, demand that your elected representatives be treated with dignity and respect. The MK party will continue to champion the cause of our people and ensuring that their voices are heard and that their interests are protected. Enkatheni angazi ngizothini. Vele yazini inkathi. Siyabonga kakhulu Sihlalo.
Thank you, Honorable Member. Honorable members, that concludes the debate and the business of this virtual mini plenary session. The mini plenary